I'm Mark Dolan and welcome to GBN America. And here's the funny thing about the race for the White House. Donald Trump's problems are legal rather than political, which is why I'll be joined by two expert voices on President Trump's court battles. Could they prevent him from running for the White House in November? Well, to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome top lawyer and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project, Gerard Filitti. Mr. Filitti, welcome to the show. Let me get our viewers up to speed. Donald Trump is being charged with conspiring to overturn the election result in Georgia. The district attorney prosecuting Fani Willis had a romantic relationship with the special prosecutor that she hired, Nathan Wade. Now, amid the scandal, Wade has been dismissed, but Fani Willis remains. Why?
Fani Willis remains because the court gave the DA's office an option. Either the entire office ceases its prosecution and is replaced, or one or the other steps down. And obviously, Fani Willis decided that as the elected district attorney, she would stay on to prosecute the case, and her former or current lover had to go.
What do you make of that decision? Do you think it's appropriate that she should still be leading this prosecution against Donald Trump?
Well, it's an interesting decision, but that's something that's currently being appealed. Judge McAfee gave leave to the Trump team to appeal it to the Court of Appeals in Georgia. The issue really is whether the dishonesty or the potential dishonesty by Fani Willis was enough to disqualify her completely from prosecuting this case. According to the Trump legal team, it should be disqualifying. According to the judge, it may not be enough. So that is currently being appealed, and we will see whether her poor judgment will affect the ability to remain on this case.
This is arguably the most serious charge that Donald Trump faces, so it's important that prosecutors get this right.
It's absolutely one of the more serious cases. The other serious case, I think, is the one in Florida with the classified documents. But in Georgia, this is a state case prosecution. Even if Donald Trump is elected president, he will not be able to pardon himself, so to speak, for any convictions here. And this is really a conspiracy case that goes to the heart of all of the efforts that he is alleged to have undergone to change the outcome of the election. So this is by far the most comprehensive case that's been brought. And if it fails now, we may not see any sort of outcome or trial before the election.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's lawyers say that he cannot raise $464 million by way of a bond in his New York fraud case. How do you see that one playing out? Donald Trump's legal team say that he should be immune from prosecutions. But what do you think about this cash? What do you think is at play here?
I think what's at play here is Donald Trump's claims of his self-made worth. And this is really troubling in a different aspect. It's that if bond companies are not able to give him a bond, it's because they don't think that he has the assets or the ability to pay back the bond if need be, or that they would not have enough assets to seize upon if the bond needs to be collected upon. What really that is an endorsement of what the court concluded, that Donald Trump's assets may not be worth what he said they are. And this is troubling from the perspective of a potential fraud, if you will, and not on the court, but in terms of his accounting. This really goes to his honesty and is a big indictment of a lot of his claims about his worth.
So is it conceivable that Donald Trump is not a billionaire, which we can all agree is a key part of his brand?
Well, it's conceivable that he is perhaps a billionaire, but he does not have the multiple billions that he says that he's worth. And it's also worth remembering that his assets are tied up in properties that are linked to one another. So the valuation of his properties may not be as much as he says they are. Certainly, he is a very wealthy man by his own right. But the complexity here is that should he try to make good on this debt that he now has to pay, he would potentially have to unwind a lot of his empire. Because when you purchase real estate, when you make all these transactions, you're effectively using your other assets as security for loans and as security for complex transactions. So it's not just a matter of selling a building or a property. In order to raise money, he would have to unwind a number of deals, which might result in the sale of multiple properties.
Can he kick this legal issue that he's got in New York into the long grass so that he gets a run at the White House? Or could this particular case catch up with him before November?
This particular case could catch up with him in November. If he is unable to post a bond to appeal this decision, then he will have to make good on it. And that means that he will be distracted from his campaigning by the need to sell assets, by the need to come up with close to $500 million when you add penalties for each day that goes on. That he will be very much distracted from the campaign trail by the need to raise assets in order to make good on this judgment. Of course, if he appeals this, then it will be postponed past election day potentially, but even then it will be lingering as a matter of fact that he will have to somehow come up with assets either to appeal or to pay the judgment. This is a distraction that he certainly does not want.
Let's stay in New York and growing tensions around the migrant community. What's the latest on that?
Well, there's incredible tension because New York is at a place where it is apparently being overwhelmed and overrun by migrants who are being transported to New York from the border states. New York has always been somewhat of an open city, a sanctuary city, providing housing, clothing, benefits, food, and job opportunities to migrants. But right now, it's beyond the capacity to take any more on. So the city is starting to restrict some of the benefits that it provides. Mayor Adams has gone to South America and Latin America to discourage migrants from coming because this is really having a negative effect on overall livability of what was once a magnificent city.
Paid to the idea that any city in America can be a sanctuary city.
Well, that's the difficulty. We are seeing the issue now of many decades of progressive policies where elected officials wanted to welcome immigrants with open arms and with no questions. No questions on whether they had the ability to work, no questions on their criminal background. And now we're seeing the consequences. The consequences are that we have been stretched thin with our economic resources and our ability to provide basic services and goods for all of these people who are also not taxpayers or contributing to the public good. And this has become a point of contention in the election as well. One of the key election issues is immigration control and what's happening on the southern border.
Well, indeed. And of course, Mayor Adams is very concerned about this. And I understand that he started a $700 million lawsuit against a bus company busing migrants into the Big Apple.
Yes, that's something that he may not ultimately be successful on, but he is trying to stop southern states like Texas from sending migrants to New York by prohibiting buses from dropping them off without prior permission. Now, the problem is you don't need to actually be dropped off in New York City by these buses. They can simply drop people off in New Jersey, the neighboring state, where they can take essentially a subway or a train into New York and end up there anyway. So while this lawsuit is in many ways a stunt and an attempt to stop some of this migrant traffic going into New York, ultimately it's not very successful because most people, when they come to America, they don't want to live in the middle of nowhere in a state that they haven't even heard of. They want to come to the Big Apple. That's the land of opportunity. So in a way, Mayor Adams' success at making New York a good economic stronghold is also the downfall in why we have so many migrants who are seeking to go there.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about Texas now. You just mentioned Texas. Can you tell me about the legal flip-flopping that's impacting efforts to police the Texas border?
Generally speaking, under U.S. law, it's the federal government that's responsible for immigration policy and for enforcing immigration laws. What Texas has done is passed its own law to restrict the ability of people to enter the state illegally and to be able to arrest them and transport them out of the state. Now, this is something that generally is reserved as a power for the federal government, not for the state government. This is why the Justice Department is looking to stop this from happening, and a court case is ongoing. Just the other day, the U.S. Supreme Court weighed in and did not stop Texas's law from being enforced. They said essentially that because because Texas's law is a temporary emergency measure, that might be something that needs to work its way through the court system slowly, and with it being empowered to be carried out in the meantime. So this is the big dispute on whether Texas can implement its own laws to protect its citizens from illegal migrants, or whether they have to wait for the Biden administration to actually do something.
How much anger is there among ordinary Americans about the migrant issue?
There's anger on some parts, but there's concern on the parts of a lot more Americans, because this is not just something that affects the southern states. Migrants are being shipped throughout the country, in northern states, in remote areas of different states. And the problem isn't about welcoming in new people. The problem is states just don't have the resources. When you have an influx of whether it's 40 or 50 people in a very small community, you now need to provide housing, you need to provide additional schooling, you need to provide services, and many places are stretched thin because the economy in some states has not been terrific in the last 4 years. So this is a concern for many Americans because they're seeing this influx of migrants, many of whom don't have their proper history checked. We don't know their criminal status. We don't know who they are, or where they come from, and they're taxing our resources essentially without our ability to pay for their needs. This is very concerning to a lot of Americans, not just on the border states, but through all the country. And it's an election year issue.
Well, indeed, of course, the figures are quite astonishing, aren't they? 3.5 million people entered the United States illegally last year. Some would say this is just the country has lost control of its borders. Others are suggesting that it's by design on the part of the government and President Joe Biden. What's your view?
I think that there could be a very good argument that, on the one hand, immigration has always been coming steadily over the southern border. The numbers now are just higher than usual, reflecting in part instability in the southern hemisphere and in other parts of the world. Remember, migrants are not just coming from Mexico; they're traveling from China, from Afghanistan, from the Middle East, from Africa to reach America. And in part, it is by design. It is a design of the Democrats to not actually enforce border control policies. There was enforcement during the Trump administration. It could very easily have continued during the Biden years. However, President Biden dismantled many of the policies that President Trump had in place, including requiring people seeking asylum to remain in Mexico until their cases were heard. So it's confusing and puzzling why there has been less enforcement on the part of the Biden administration. It's easy to ascribe ulterior motives to this, perhaps for future voters to actually participate in Democratic elections and not Republican ones. But ultimately, the issue has grown out of control, and the lack of enforcement of current laws is problematic.
Mr. Felitti, thank you so much for joining us on GBN America. Privileged to have you on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, for more on Donald Trump's legal woes, let's get the views of civil rights attorney, radio host, and candidate for Fulton County Superior Court Judge, Robert Patillo. Mr. Patillo, welcome to GBN America. Do you think that Fani Willis should still be leading the prosecution against Donald Trump?
Well, I think the question in this case is this question of the functioning of the Fulton County court system. Let's think about this for a second. These alleged crimes took place in 2020. We're now in 2024, and it looks like these cases won't go to trial until 2025 at the earliest. Any system where a defendant has to sit for 4, 5, 6 years waiting for their case to go to trial clearly is not a functional judiciary system. We have the 8th Amendment in America that guarantees us prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. I contend that it's cruel and unusual punishment for any defendant, whether it be President Trump or whether it be your pauper on the street, to have to wait 5 or 6 years for their case to go to trial. So I think we can look at the micro issue of Fani Willis versus Donald Trump, but that does not solve the macro issue of the lack of functionality within our criminal justice system. And indeed, we had 10 people die in the Fulton County Jail last year, primarily because of these long wait times awaiting trial. It's one thing if you're out on bond. It's a completely different thing if you're in custody, being held without a trial date for 4, 5, 6 years awaiting trial. And that's why I'm running to try to change that system.
And more power to you in hoping to achieve that. We have a similar problem here in the UK. I don't think the pandemic helped. But can you explain the judge's justification to me? Because he seems to accept that Fani Willis lied, but at the same time accepts the rest of her testimony as fact. Surely that's problematic.
Well, this is part of the concern that many voters have within the county, that they feel that that a regular defendant would not have this sort of hearing. That you had 2 weeks of hearings on whether or not the prosecutor will be disqualified. Then you had 2 weeks to make a determination about whether or not they'll be disqualified. Then you have additional information being put out there, including a scathing order from that judge. And then it was announced yesterday that he ruled to allow the appeals court to oversee the case. So essentially, in a case where time is of the essence, has been delayed by close to 2 months from going to proceedings. I think that anybody in that situation, if you are a defendant or if you are somebody sitting in jail waiting for trial, this is absorbing hundreds of thousands of dollars of state resources, days of courtroom time where other people's cases can't be heard, hours of the work of prosecutions and judicial staffs, and this is not the way that other people would be treated in this situation. We have to assure that our court system is fair across the board and that everyone has an equal opportunity to have their cases heard. And this is part of the issue many people have with the execution of this and other cases. There's another high-profile case in Fulton County with the rapper Young Thug, where that case has now been announced. They're not going to go to trial until 2027 on that trial. So we clearly have to have judges that have the experience and have the temperament and have the understanding of our criminal justice system to the extent where they can move these cases along and ensure fundamental fairness both to the state and to the defendants.
Surely Fani Willis staying on the case will make it easier for Donald Trump to appeal should he be convicted.
I don't think that's necessarily the case. The prosecutor represents the state of Georgia, or the state of Georgia and Fulton County in these cases. Regardless of what goes on with that individual prosecutor, unless there's a determination that they acted improperly in securing a conviction, then that will not be justification for an appeal. However, we do have this issue of the institutional legitimacy of the court system, whether or not people believe that the court system is administered in a fair and equitable fashion. Once you start losing that, as one of our Supreme Court justices said, John Jay, once you begin losing that, then you erode the belief within our constitutional system, our constitutional republic. We've seen thus far that people are not simply saying they disagree with the rulings that come out of this and other courts. They claim that those rulings are illegitimate. They claim that there's no institutional integrity within our court system. We have to restore that integrity if we want everyone to follow the rules and follow the system. Imagine being a 14-year-old boy right now, living through this era of our criminal justice system. By the time all this is done and you're 18, how much would you actually believe in our system, believe that you will get a fair trial, believe that you will be treated equally within our system?
Most definitely. Why are you running against Judge McAfee yourself?
You know, I've been one of those people where I've been in media. I've been an attorney in the Fulton County court system for over 15 years. And there comes a time where you have to simply jump in the arena, as Teddy Roosevelt once said, that we can protest outside, we can complain on media, we can talk about what needs to happen, or you can get in there yourself and do it yourself. And that's what I've decided to do. Looking at this case and looking at the other cases in the Fulton County judicial system, I've had clients who have dealt with being in custody for 5-6 years awaiting trial. I've dealt with clients where you are denied a bond and then you're sitting in jail, not even convicted, but you're just waiting on a bond to get out for 6 months or 8 months or a year. And I want people to think about what that does to you as a human being. Once you're out, what are you going out to? Your job is gone, your apartment is gone, your car is gone, your credit is ruined. People's lives are being destroyed by the inefficiency of the court system. There are big issues in the Fulton County court system that predated Donald Trump and Fani Willis. There are big issues in the Fulton County court system that will exist long after this trial is outside of the national and international attention. And we have to work on creating that systemic change that is necessary to build the type of judicial system that our citizens can have full faith in. And that's what got me into this race.
What about this issue of Donald Trump's legal problems? If he's prevented from running for president due to all of these court cases, will this not lead to a democratic crisis, with many Americans taking the view that the law is being leveraged to deny their political will?
That's why it's so important that we talk about this question of the institutional legitimacy of the court system. Everything has to be public. Everything has to be transparent. People need to be of the belief system that that our system is fair and equitable, and that you have an outcome, even if you disagree with it, but that is understandable and that is justifiable to the American people. The judges in these cases have to be seen as being umpires, calling balls and strikes, not putting your finger on one side or the other, or assisting the prosecution or assisting the defense in these cases. If you do not have that, then that's what leads to the breakdown of democratic systems. Just look at the situation going on in Pakistan right now with Imran Khan, where many people believe that the court system and the military colluded together to deny him the ability to serve as president of Pakistan. That leads to armed conflict, and we cannot have that in America, which is why it's important to put judges on the bench who are willing to stand up for the rule of law, whose only allegiance is to the Constitution of the United States and to the citizens of their jurisdiction, and are willing to make the hard decisions and not punt them to other jurisdictions when they feel that it's politically expedient. If we concentrate on the Constitution and the rule of law, the people will have confidence in whatever determination comes out, and that is what allows our system to function going forward.
But they won't have confidence in the American judicial system if Donald Trump is not a candidate in November. For the sake of American democracy, is it your view that Trump must run?
It's my view that we have to follow the rule of law. The reason being is that once you start making exceptions to the rule of law, then everybody's going to want an exception. We have to ensure, as I said previously, that whether you are a president or a pauper, that the rule of law applies to you equally. And if, according to the Constitution, Donald Trump is ineligible to run, then we have to follow the Constitution and follow the rule of law. My hope for any individual is that if you are innocent, I've done my career as a criminal defense lawyer, that if you are innocent, you are found innocent. However, conversely, if you're guilty, you must be found guilty based upon our system. So my view is that it's not simply a question of whether or not I believe Donald Trump should run or not. The question is how our system functions. I don't think anybody will believe that if somebody is a convicted criminal, they should have deference given to them, or that you get extra rights simply because they are wealthy or politically well connected. Every single person has to have the same rights within our system.
However, tens of millions of people would like to vote for Donald Trump. Do you not fear for the future of American democracy if he's not on the ticket, if people can't vote for him? Are you not concerned about the consequences for American society?
I don't think that can come into play because once you start making those determinations that someone is ostensibly too big for the criminal justice system, then you're no longer a nation of laws. You're now a nation of men. Then what will be next?
But what would you say, Mr. Patillo? I don't want to interrupt you because I appreciate what you're saying, but there are millions of Americans who think that these court cases are politically motivated. They're not happy with the fact that Fani Willis has had a relationship with somebody that she employed as a prosecutor. Just based upon the case of Georgia alone, many Americans will think this stinks.
Well, this is what I talk about when I talk about making sure that everything is public, that people understand the rulings, people see the evidence, and people understand exactly why the outcome is taking place. This is also presupposing that President Trump will be found guilty in these cases. He has every right of any other criminal defendant in these cases. He has millions of dollars to defend himself in these court cases. And just as with anyone else, he has to abide by the Constitution, just as every citizen should. He should not be given favor, but he also should not be punished because of his status, his political affiliation, his wealth, or any other issues. And the American people need to see this process working itself out. They need to see the criminal justice system, and it cannot be seen as a situation where because he has millions of supporters, he's held to a different standard. If you think about the O.J. Simpson trial from 30 years ago, he had millions of supporters around the country, and we are still sitting here 30 or 40 years later debating the merits of that case because people did not believe in the system. They did not believe in the outcome. They did not believe that that a fair verdict was reached on one side or the other. This is the importance of abiding by the rule of law, because once you start making exceptions, once you start creating deviances, once you start making variations, you end up with a system that people simply do not believe in, and that's when you start seeing systems collapse. This is a broad constitutional issue that cannot be undermined or changed because of one person.
Robert Patillo, always a treat to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thanks for watching GBN America. For more videos like this, head straight to gbnews.com/US.